Hey, so I actually got a very, very, very short question through on Instagram, and all she said was, "How do you go about breaking your silence?" And I literally just saw it. I was like, right, boom, we're going straight on because I don't know. I just feel like intuitively that is something that needs to be answered right now. And you know, I've talked about this a lot. I mean, my book here is literally called Breaking the Silence. Like, if you haven't read this yet, go and read it. Okay, just go onto Amazon, Breaking the Silence, or click the link in my bio on Instagram. It's easily found. Breaking the Silence, Perry Power. Just put that on Amazon, you'll find it. This book is split into three parts. All right, so part one is my story. Part two is a story of 14 other survivors, and the last page of that part two, which is story number 15, that allows the reader to take a pen and then write their story inside of it, which is, so it becomes like a practical thing. And then part three of this book is the steps that one can take to start breaking their silence and start claiming the life that they deserve, standing within their power and living with freedom. All right, so definitely read this. All right, every single one of you, if you're still living in silence, or you shared your story once ages ago, but you still feel like you got a lot of silence attached to you, then read this book. Even though I'm going to talk about it now, still read it because there's lots of different nuances that I cover inside the book that I think will help, and also just reading the stories of other people I think will really help too. So when it comes to breaking your silence, I always say don't follow what I done. Now what I done was I lived in silence. I then saw an interview on Ellen DeGeneres. It's on YouTube, but it was an Ellen DeGeneres interview with her and Lewis Howes. And Lewis Howes is on my bookshelf somewhere. He wrote a book and he launched it called Mask of Masculinity. And he was talking about all the different masks that he wore throughout the years, growing up from a boy to like a teenager, becoming a man. Just those masks that he wore. And he was saying that he was wearing these masks because he was sexually abused when he was younger. And that was his way of coping. And when he said that, he just articulated it in a way that made me realize what I had been doing. And for me, it was becoming someone else, but in a bad way, in a negative way, lying and basically just running away from that child that had been abused, running away from my inner child. I was ignoring it, and I just kept it as a prisoner. And so what I'd done, because there was no guide for me to follow, I just did what I felt like I needed to do. And I am an advocate for most things in life, that what we've done was the right thing, and because we've done it. And so I don't really regret it. I probably would have regretted it if the response had been different, now knowing what I know and knowing what I share to other people. But back then I waited. I just knew that I needed to get these masks off, and how I was going to do that was by speaking out. So I waited. I was dating someone at the time, and we was maybe, I don't know, 4 years into our relationship. Maybe 3 or 4. Yeah, about 4 years. And she was working at a pub, and I was waiting for her to come back home. And I was thinking, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say to her, let's go out and walk Amara, our dog. And she came back, and then we went out for a walk. And I remember we was probably like 2 minutes from the house. And we was walking. I remember feeling, I don't remember anything that I said to her. Really, I remember like 2% of it. I don't really remember it. But I remember how I felt, and I felt like I was stark naked, walking the streets, right? All the hairs was up, I was shivering, like, I was just like so cold. And Brene Brown says that vulnerability feels like you're butt naked out in public and everyone's just staring at you. And that was basically how I felt. It was just 100% vulnerability. And I spoke to her about how the man that she started to date was a creation, and I wasn't really that person. But that was because it was a response, because I'd been running away. And I remember that bit, but I don't remember anything after that. But I know that I would have went into then saying about being abused, and I don't really remember her response because I was just like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I disassociated or whatever, but however, what I do know is that she welcomed me with open arms. She made me feel good and included and okay. And it was maybe 4, 5, 6 months later, I was at a business conference for an online fitness business that I had, and it was like 6 or 7 of us in the room, very intimate mastermind retreat type of thing. And they just asked us to go around the room. This was the first day. They said, right, go around the room, just introduce yourselves. And we were sitting in like half a circle. Half a circle. We had the 2 coaches at the front here looking at us, and we had the couches going around like this, and I was on the end. So when they went around, I was either going to start sharing, or I was either going to be the first person to start talking, or I was going to be the last person. And I remember being like, I don't want to be first. I don't want to be first. Now, but at this point, I had no idea what was going to come out of my mouth. As far as I knew, I'll just be like, yep, I'm just here to grow my business and what have you. But I think at that point, I had an idea that I wanted to change what I was doing in my fitness business and move it towards working with parents to make them healthier and fit, because I didn't want any parent to die from a heart attack at the age of 48. Now, at that point, I just thought that my dad just had some bad habits and he's just, alcohol, but I didn't really see anything deeper than that. So therefore, I just wanted to have a fitness company for parents. So I knew that I was going to talk about my dad, and I think that I felt a bit uncomfortable about it. And then it came round to me, and then I was just like staring at the floor, and I couldn't hear anybody speaking, and there was silence. And then James, was one of the guys that was running it, he was like, Perry? I was like, yep. He goes, it's your go. I said, okay. I was like, and then I literally do not remember a single word that I said. I do not remember a single word, but I do know what I talked about. Talked about being abused, and then talked about my dad's death, and still haven't healed or recovered from it, and all that sort of stuff. And I just remember there just being a bit of silence after, and then James and George, the 2 guys, basically said like, right, we're going to introduce you to someone because he lost his dad, and he did a presentation around forgiveness, and we feel like that maybe you should watch that. Anyway, in our first break, one of the personal trainers that was part of the 6 of us came over to me and thanked me for sharing that story, because she feels like it brought the group together. And it's interesting because I was there for like 3 or 4 days, and when you hang around people who are where you want to be, what tends to happen is, because you are a product of your environment, and then you change your environment because you're hanging around someone who is where you want to be. So you start to soak in some of that new environment. And the way that I explain it is that we live in a bubble, right? We live in a bubble, and when we are surrounding ourselves with someone who is where we want to be, what that does is it forces our bubble to increase in size, and we're seeing more things. Sure, hearts, why not? And it introduces us to more things. We see more, we become more aware, and we have more belief. Like, okay, maybe I can do this, because the person that you want to be, he's like, well, I did this, or, and you're like, okay, well, I need to do it too. You start to believe more, you start to see more, you start to be more motivated, more inspired. And so driving home from this mastermind event, which was like, I can't remember, 2 or 3 days long, I was very, very aware that my bubble had been increased in size. And I was like, right, I feel like now is a time to really get my story out there. And the way that looks is that it needs to go on Facebook, because I was heavy on Facebook at the time, and I still am, but I'm heavy on multiple platforms now. But back then it was just Facebook. I said, I need to do a video and just put it on there. And then in my head I was like, okay, I'll do it when I get back home, so I still got a bit of a drive. Cool. Then a voice is like, I don't think so, Perry, because when you get back home, your girlfriend's going to say, oh, Perry, how was the event? And she's got her friends around, so you're going to get into that environment. And then when her friends leave, then she's probably going to ask you, like, okay, so how did the event go? Then you're going to go back and forth. And what tends to happen is your bubble will start to decrease back because you're going back to that safety net, back to that home, okay? And you probably will not share your story because you'll talk yourself out of it. And I was like, okay, fine, cool, I know what I need to do. I turned my car into the next road and I parked up. I got my phone out, it took me 7 takes. And I ended up recording my story. And I was fucking petrified, hence why it took me 7 takes. And I put the video on there and I started talking myself out of it. I was going to delete the video, threw the phone in the back of the car, force myself into action. Because again, sometimes our thoughts just do not serve us. We have to force ourselves into action to trump those thoughts. So anyway, I drove back home. And then the video blew up. Now that right there was when, because then my family watched it, and then my family then tells me about my dad being abused, and that I wasn't the only one. And that's what triggered the purpose that got me to where I am today. The reason why I shared that is because that's my journey. And I was lucky that my girlfriend at the time welcomed me with open arms. Because for sure, that gave me this sort of, that gave me proof and experience that my story can be accepted. It was a positive experience. So if I was going to share it again, well, the last time I shared it was a positive experience. So I think it's safe to say that's going to be a positive experience again, you know. But I'm very, very aware that for a lot of people, it doesn't work out that way. And here's the thing. If my girlfriend at the time paused for just a bit too long, even though she wanted to support me, but in her head she's thinking, shit, okay, how do I respond to this? And that pausing, I could have read that the wrong way. And I could have been triggered, and she was like, no, I was just trying to think about, and I'm like, no, damage is done now, you know? And so that's like, you know, I could have just read into it too much, or she could have just said, you know what, you should have told me before, like, I don't know how, you know, if this is all a lie, you know, whatever. Basically just rejected me. What I've done, what I've shared that second time at the event, then the video, I don't know. I can't tell that, you know, I can't tell what would have happened in a reality that doesn't exist. But what I will say is that the decreases, the percentages would have been far lower for me to have done that. Because now, the last time I shared my story, I was rejected, or I wasn't believed, or I felt less than, you know, whatever. So now I associate my truth with rejection. Now it increases my chances of living back in silence for forever, potentially. Okay, because what's the fucking point in doing it again? Why am I going to open myself up to more pain? Okay, now here's the thing. Here is why I don't tell people who are living in silence to go ahead and tell someone that they love. Go and tell your partner. You know, tell them the truth. Okay, break your silence. Tell your loved ones. Tell your parents. Tell whoever. Because their reaction is outside your control. And it is near impossible to not be seeking validation when you share your story for the first time. If you've been living in silence for, like me, I lived in silence for 12 years. If you've been living in silence for quite some time and you break that silence by telling someone, you're seeking validation. You want to be believed. Of course you do. Because the last amount of however many years, you've either not believed yourself, or you have been feeling, you felt shame, okay? And you basically want a reaction that gives you the opposite of that. The worst thing in the world is for you to get a reaction that mirrors how your internal world has been. You know, like if someone says, I don't believe you, you're crushed. If someone says you deserved it, or some type of dismissal, body language, anything, you best believe that shame that you once felt is now 10 times, you know, like the effects, because someone else has showed you, reflected to you your worst demons and fears and insecurities. Okay, so let's protect you from that. So here's what I say, and many people have followed this, and it's helped many hundreds, probably even thousands. Okay, actually, when it would have been, I've sold thousands of copies of the book, so I'm sure it would be in the many thousands of people. When it comes to breaking the silence, you must do it to yourself first in as many different ways as you can. All right, instead of telling someone else on step 1, tell them on step number 17, step number 22, step number 12. Okay, let's go with the number 12. Tell them on the 12th turn. The first 11 times, break the silence to yourself in 11 different ways. Write a poem, journal, tell yourself in the mirror, choreograph a dance piece that unleashes those emotions that you've had trapped for so long. Go clay molding and make yourself a cup. It doesn't matter what you do. Okay, make yourself a cup with the intention of allowing your story to flow through it, and now that cup becomes a physical representation of your truth. Okay, doesn't matter how you do it, just as long as you consciously make an effort to just release whatever, just in little bits, through each method of you breaking that silence. Because what happens here is that every single time that you do that, you start to take ownership over your truth. You start to believe you. You start to validate you. You start to love you. Okay, you start to step into your power each and every time that you do it. And then when you do tell someone on step number 12, sure you would like it for them to give you love, you would like it for them to believe you, you would like it for them to validate you, you would like it for them to support you, and so should you want that. But if they don't, it won't break you. Why? Because you are solid. You have strong foundations within you. Because that shit there, that control, that reaction is outside your control. What is within your control is how you respond to your own truth and your own story. And once you take ownership over that, which comes through breaking your silence in as many different ways as possible, okay, you're standing within your power, right? So when it comes to telling someone, you're telling them because you've chosen to, because you want to. You know, you're like, I'm telling you because I am. You don't believe me? All right, that's unfortunate. I wish you did, but that sounds like a you problem. That's not a me problem. I know what happened. You know, it's coming from that place of assurance. It takes time to get there. It does. But here's the thing. It's much better to start putting the building blocks in place now to get there than just not doing it at all, or just rushing it and telling someone and potentially being burned and it fucking you up. Okay? You don't need to do that. So, break the silence to yourself first in as many different ways as you can. There is an unlimited amount of ways. Just do something that is an expression of your story. It could be verbal. It could be through using your hands. It could be emotionally. It could be anything. Okay, and trust me, you'll find it. The more times you do it, you will start to have released. You'll start to have let go a little bit more. You'll feel a bit lighter. And just keep on doing it until, even if it takes you 36 times, doesn't matter. You do it when you're ready. Okay? Let's go. Let's break the silence. Let's be powerful, because you're a warrior. Yeah? You're a warrior. You're not a victim. You're a victim of the situation that happened. Yeah, you're a victim of that, but you're not a victim now of life. You're not a victim, okay? You're a survivor. You're a warrior. So let's do it. All right, you owe it to yourself. You owe it to your inner child. Start building that connection. To start hearing that child within you speak. All right, build that relationship, bridge that gap, and start breaking the silence to yourself. And when you're ready, then you can tell other people. But until then, focus on you. All right? I hope that helps.